The front door clicked shut behind her, the sound echoing through the quiet house. Sarah dropped her suitcase in the hallway, the weight of her week-long business trip finally off her shoulders. The house was too silent, though. No hum of the TV, no clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Just the faint sound of hushed voices drifting down the stairs. Her brow furrowed. Why is he whispering? She kicked off her heels and padded up the steps, her heart starting to thud in her chest. The voices grew louder as she approached the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and a sliver of light spilled into the dim hallway. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Something's wrong. Her stomach twisted as she pushed the door open, the sight before her freezing her in place. There he was. Her husband, Mark, lying in their bed. And next to him, her sister, Emily. They were tangled together under the sheets, their faces flushed and their breathing uneven. Mark's eyes widened as he saw her, and he bolted upright, the sheet slipping down to reveal his bare chest. Emily gasped, clutching the blanket to her chest, her cheeks burning red. Sarah. Mark stammered, his voice cracking. I can explain. Sarah's vision blurred as the room seemed to spin around her. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. How could they? Her heart pounded in her ears, drowning out anything else he might have said. She stepped forward, her movements stiff and mechanical, like she was watching herself from outside her body. Sarah, please, Emily said, her voice trembling. It's not what it looks like. The words snapped her back to reality. She let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and unfamiliar. Not what it looks like, she repeated, her voice low and dangerous. You're in my bed with my husband, and it's not what it looks like? Are you serious? Mark scrambled out of bed, pulling on his boxers quickly. Sarah, listen to me, he pleaded, his hands outstretched as if he could calm her with his touch. It wasn't like that. It just happened. It just happened, she spat, her voice rising with every word. You make it sound like you tripped and fell into her. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me? Emily stood now, clutching the sheet around her like a shield. Sarah, I'm so sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I never meant to hurt you. We didn't mean for this to happen. Sarah's eyes flicked between them, her chest heaving with the effort of keeping her anger contained. Her sister's apology only fueled the fire inside her. She's my sister. My own sister. The betrayal cut deeper than she could have imagined. She stepped closer to Emily, her hand twitching at her side. Did you think about me at all? Sarah demanded, her voice shaking. Did you think about your family? Or were you too busy sneaking around behind my back? Mark stepped between them, his hands up in a placating gesture. Sarah, please, he begged. Let's just talk about this. We can figure it out. She glared at him, her eyes blazing. Figure it out? You've already made your choice, Mark. You chose her over me. You chose to destroy everything we had. Her hand shot out before she could stop it, the sharp sound of a slap echoing through the room. Mark staggered back, his hand flying to his cheek. Without hesitation, Sarah turned to Emily, her hand connecting with her sister's face in a swift, brutal motion. Emily cried out, clutching her cheek as tears streamed down her face. You both, Sarah's voice broke, her chest tightening as the reality of the situation hit her full force. She stumbled back, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. How could you do this to me? Mark reached for her, his eyes desperate. Sarah, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I never wanted to hurt you. I still love you. This was a mistake. She shook her head, backing away from him. A mistake? Is that what you call this? Do you think that makes it okay? Emily stepped forward, her face pale and tear-streaked. Sarah, please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know we messed up. But we're family. We can work through this. Sarah laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and broken. Family? You betrayed me, Emily. You both did. And now you think you can just fix it? Like it never happened? She turned to leave, her legs shaking beneath her. But before she could take another step, Mark grabbed her arm, his grip firm but not painful. Wait, he said, his voice pleading. Don't go. Let's talk about this. Please. She yanked her arm free, her eyes blazing with fury. Don't touch me, she snapped. I don't even know who you are anymore. With that, she stormed out of the room, her chest heaving with emotion. The sound of her sister's sobs and Mark's desperate pleas followed her down the stairs, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stay in that house, not with them. Not after what they'd done. The front door slammed behind her as she stepped out into the cool night air, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on her like a physical thing. She leaned against the railing, her breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. Tears streamed down her face as the reality of what had just happened sank in. She didn't know what to do. Where to go. How to fix the mess her life had become. All she knew was that she couldn't stay here. Not now. Maybe not ever. The sound of the door creaking open behind her made her freeze. She didn't turn around, didn't want to face them. But she could feel his presence, could hear his uneven breathing as he stepped closer. Sarah, Mark said, his voice trembling. Please. Let's talk. We can't just leave it like this. She closed her eyes, her heart aching in her chest. What do you want me to say, Mark? She whispered, her voice barely audible. You destroyed everything. Everything we built. How am I supposed to forgive you for that? The tension in the air was palpable as Sarah stood on the porch, her back to the house, her fists clenched at her sides. The cool night breeze did little to soothe the fire burning inside her. She could hear Mark's uneven breathing behind her, his voice trembling as he pleaded for her to stay, to talk. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not when the image of him and Emily in their bed was still burned into her mind. Before Mark could say another word, the sound of quick footsteps echoed from the doorway. Emily emerged, her flaming red cheeks a stark contrast to the paleness of her face. She clutched the blanket tightly around her, her bare feet padding softly on the wooden porch. Sarah, Emily called out, her voice shaky but determined. She stepped forward, her hand reaching out to grab Mark's. Let me help you fix this, she said, her eyes locked on Sarah's back. Sarah turned sharply, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of her sister standing there, holding onto Mark's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Help fix this? Sarah thought bitterly. You're the one who broke it. Fix it? Sarah spat, her voice low and venomous. How exactly do you plan to fix this, Emily? By pretending it never happened? By acting like you didn't just betray me in the worst possible way? Emily flinched, her grip on Mark's hand tightening. I know I messed up, Sarah. I know I hurt you. But I don't want to lose you. You're my sister. I love you. And I love Mark too. I just wanted to feel something, to feel wanted. Sarah's jaw tightened, her eyes flickering between Emily and Mark. Feel wanted? The words echoed in her mind, stirring up a mix of anger and pain. So, this was about feeling wanted, she sneered. You think that justifies what you did? Mark stepped forward, his bare chest heaving as he tried to interject. Sarah, please. This isn't just about Emily. This is about me too. I messed up. I know I did. But we need to talk about this. We need to figure out where we go from here. Sarah's gaze shifted to Mark, her eyes blazing with hurt and betrayal. Where we go from here, she repeated, her voice rising. You both just shattered any trust one had in you. How am I supposed to just talk about that? How am I supposed to move past this? Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Sarah. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. I I need you to give me a chance. Give us a chance. Sarah shook her head, her hands trembling as she wrapped her arms around herself. A chance? You think you deserve a chance after what you did? You think I can just forget this ever happened? Mark stepped closer, his hand outstretched as if to touch her, but he hesitated, his voice pleading. We're not asking you to forget, Sarah. We're asking you to understand. To try to understand why this happened. To figure out where we go from here. Sarah's eyes welled with tears, her voice breaking as she spoke. Understand? How can I possibly understand this, Mark? How can I ever trust you again? How can I ever look at either of you the same way? Emily's grip on Mark's hand tightened, her voice trembling with emotion. I know it's going to take time, Sarah. I know we've hurt you deeply. But we're here, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. Just, please, don't walk away. Don't shut us out. Sarah stared at them, her heart pounding in her chest. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, it was all too much. But somewhere deep inside, a small part of her wanted to believe them. Wanted to believe that they could find a way to move past this. Mark's eyes were filled with desperation as he took another step closer. Please, Sarah. Just, stay. Let's talk. Let's figure this out together. Sarah's breath hitched, her resolve wavering as she looked between them. Could they really fix this? Could they ever rebuild what they had? She didn't know. But the thought of walking away, of leaving everything behind, was almost too much to bear. Emily's voice was soft, almost pleading. We're not perfect, Sarah. We've made mistakes. Big ones. But we're here. And we're willing to fight for you. For us. Please, just give us a chance. Sarah closed her eyes, her heart aching as she tried to sort through the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Finally, she let out a shaky breath, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can do this. Mark reached out, his hand gently brushing against her arm. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just, stay. Let's talk. Let's try to work through this together. Sarah opened her eyes, her gaze meeting Mark's. The pain in his eyes was undeniable, but so was the sincerity. She glanced at Emily, who looked just as desperate, just as hopeful. Okay, Sarah said softly, her voice trembling. We'll talk. Mark let out a relieved breath, his hand squeezing hers gently. Thank you, Sarah. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you. But as they stood there, the weight of what had happened still hung heavy in the air. Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. That there would be a long, difficult road ahead. But for now, she was willing to take that first step. Mark pulled her into a tentative embrace, his arms wrapping around her as if he was afraid she might disappear. Sarah hesitated for a moment before allowing herself to lean into him, her head resting against his chest. Emily stood nearby, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and hope. I'll do whatever it takes, Sarah, she whispered. I promise. Sarah didn't respond, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. But as she stood there in Mark's arms, she couldn't help but wonder if they could really find their way back to each other. Or if this was just the beginning of the end. Finally, Mark pulled back slightly, his hand gently cupping her cheek as he looked into her eyes. We'll get through this, Sarah. Together. I promise. Sarah let out a shaky breath, her eyes filling with tears as she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Emily stepped closer, her hand reaching out to gently touch Sarah's arm. Whatever you need, Sarah. Whatever it takes. We're here for you. Sarah looked between them, her heart heavy but her resolve slowly beginning to strengthen. She knew that this wasn't going to be easy. That there would be pain, anger, and difficult conversations ahead. But for the first time since she had walked in on them, she felt a small glimmer of hope. Let's go inside, Sarah said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. We have a lot to talk about. Mark nodded, his hand slipping into hers as he led her back toward the house. Emily followed closely behind, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and determination. As they walked inside, the weight of what had happened still hung heavily in the air. But for now, they were together. And that was a start. The trio stepped into the dimly lit living room, the tension so thick it felt like the walls were closing in. Sarah's hands trembled as she sat down on the edge of the couch, her gaze fixed on the floor. Mark hovered nearby, his bare chest still exposed, his face a mask of guilt and desperation. Emily sat awkwardly in the armchair, clutching the blanket tightly around her, her red cheeks burning with shame. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice slicing through the silence like a knife. I want to know everything. I want to know how this started. I want to know why it started. And don't you dare lie to me. Mark flinched, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Sarah, he trailed off, his voice cracking. I don't even know where to begin. Start at the beginning, Sarah snapped, her eyes blazing. How long has this been going on? Emily shifted uncomfortably, her voice barely audible. It wasn't like that, Sarah. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Sarah's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. It just happened, she repeated, her tone dripping with disbelief. You don't just happen to end up in bed with your sister's husband. So tell me. How did it just happen? Mark sank into the chair opposite her, his shoulders slumping. It started a few weeks ago, he admitted, his voice low. Emily came over one night when you were out of town. We were talking, and it just got out of hand. Talking about what? Sarah pressed, her voice sharp. What could you possibly have to talk about that would lead to this? Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. I was feeling lonely. I've always felt like I don't belong in our family. I never felt like anyone really noticed me. And Mark, he was just there. He listened. He made me feel like I mattered. Sarah's chest tightened, her heart aching with a mixture of anger and sorrow. She looked at Mark, her voice cold. And you? What's your excuse? Mark ran a hand through his hair, his face etched with guilt. I don't know, Sarah. I've been struggling. With work, with everything. I've felt like I've been failing you, failing myself. And when Emily was here, it felt like I could breathe again. Like I wasn't just screwing everything up. Sarah's jaw tightened, her fingers digging into the fabric of the couch. So you decided the best way to fix things was to sleep with my sister? It wasn't like that, Mark said quickly, his voice pleading. It wasn't about sex. It was about feeling connected. Feeling like someone actually saw me. Sarah's laugh was hollow. Connected? You think this is what connection looks like? Destroying our marriage? Betraying me? Emily leaned forward, her voice desperate. Sarah, please, we never meant to hurt you. We weren't thinking. It was a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. But we'll do anything to make it right. Please, just give us a chance to fix this. Sarah's hands clenched into fists, her nails biting into her palms. Fix it? How do you expect to fix this? You've shattered everything. Do you have any idea how much this hurts? How much you've destroyed? Mark reached out, his hand hovering over hers. Sarah, I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you. But I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm willing to do anything to make this right. Please, just, don't give up on us. Sarah pulled her hand away, her voice trembling with barely restrained fury. Don't touch me. She looked between them, her heart breaking all over again. You both say you want to fix this, but how? How do you expect to rebuild trust after this? How do I ever look at either of you the same way again? Emily's tears spilled over, her voice choked. I don't know, but we'll do whatever it takes. We'll go to counseling. We'll be open and honest about everything. Just, please, Sarah. Please don't shut us out. Sarah sat back, her mind racing. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to make them feel even a fraction of the pain she was feeling. But deep down, beneath the anger and the hurt, there was a part of her that still loved Mark. Still cared for Emily. And that part of her wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way through this. But the road ahead was treacherous, and she wasn't sure she was ready to walk it. Tell me everything, she said finally, her voice firm. Every last detail. Don't leave anything out. Mark and Emily exchanged a glance, their faces pale with dread. But they knew there was no turning back now. It was after that dinner at your parents' house, Mark began, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily seemed upset, so I asked her what was wrong. She started talking about how she always felt like she was in your shadow, and I listened. I shouldn't have, but I did. And then, it just spiraled from there. Sarah's chest tightened, the image of them together burning in her mind. And when did it cross the line, she demanded, her voice trembling. When did it go from talking to this? Emily's face crumpled, her voice breaking. It was a week later. I came over to drop off some stuff for you, and Mark was here. We were talking, and he hugged me, and then, she trailed off, her face flushing with shame. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. Sarah's eyes burned with tears, her voice raw with emotion. But you did. She looked at Mark, her heart breaking all over again. And so did you. Mark's face crumpled, his voice choked. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. I swear, Sarah, I'll do whatever it takes. Just, please. Don't give up on us. Sarah stood abruptly, her hands trembling at her sides. I need time to think. I need to process this. I can't, she shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I just can't. Mark reached out, his voice desperate. Sarah, please, don't leave. We can get through this. We can. But Sarah was already walking toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed space. She needed clarity. And she wasn't sure she could find either in that house,